I was good, I would be very... Some of you have never heard of Aaron Brummit. That's okay. If you need a creation scientist to tell you that you know God exists and that you love him, you don't really need Aaron for that. Eric Hogan, to name but one, is more than enough. But I'm all for free speech, and Aaron Brummit deserves some, despite what the Springfield, Missouri police force may think. Plus, just when you think creation science is done and sealed, there's always a new discovery. If I was God, I would be very angry. That's God, which I am not, would like my supporters to please stop coming up with new stuff in my defense. The more they come up with, the harder it is for me to defend them. So imagine my surprise when Aaron Brummit came to me one day and introduced me to a colleague of his. "Meet Asimo," said Aaron, beaming with pride. Asimo was beaming as well, and he shook my hand. He had a firm grip, and I made a note to the doctor to get an artificial hand, as there was no point in waiting for my arm to evolve again. "He's a robot," said Aaron. I forgot to mention it, but Aaron Brummit is not quite a creation scientist yet. But he's the next best thing, a science fiction creator. "Nice to meet you, Asimo," I said, and turned to Aaron. "Very impressive, a wonderful creation." I'm not sure if you are aware of the fact that when you see a creation, you can assume with confidence that someone, a creator, has created it. "Would you like to know how it was created?" asked Aaron. I absolutely did, and said so. "Why don't you ask him to tell you his own heartwarming story?" asked Aaron. "It all started at the Big Bang," said Asimo, and proceeded to tell the story of how a supernova exploded and the element from which he evolved were created, followed by 7 billion years of metal evolution, and the end of which a central processing unit evolved inside what looks like a human head and plugged into the mains for the first time. It was a long story, and the sun was now a red giant, which killed all living things on Earth, except for us, oddly enough. But Asimo was still talking, and I was still listening with interest, and Aaron was still beaming with pride. The more I listened to Asimo's story, the more believable I found it. It had an uncanny similarity to another fantastic story of evolving and struggle, the evolution of organic life, which until this conversation I thought was unique. Then, 5 billion years into Asimo's story, Aaron put an arm around Asimo's shoulder. The robot was about to tell me how a finger flicked a switch, and he started life as a creation scientist, but he stopped just before the word creation. "Thank you, Asimo," said Aaron. "They'll do for now." He unplugged his colleague from the wall and said to me, completely and rudely ignoring his friend and colleague, "He's talking too much." "Why did you have to go and murder God's creation?" I was very distressed. He just stood there and smiled. I was beginning to suspect foul play, you see. I am not a man of faith. If somebody tells me a story, I begin with skepticism and work my way slowly towards faith as the facts unfold and support the story. But sometimes the story is so good that momentarily I forget to apply my skepticism. "You're a man of great faith," said Aaron. It wasn't meant as a compliment. From a skeptic, I would expect to smell a rat earlier than 5 billion years into the story. "What do you mean?" I was scratching my head. Asimo's story was a perfect proof that evolution did not need a creator. "I don't know how to tell you this without destroying your worldview," said Aaron, "but it took me about 20 minutes to create Asimo, using off-the-shelf parts and Google Plug." I've heard of Google Plug. You can, for a modest sum, connect your brain to Google and so know everything at all times. And Google knows everything about you at all times. If it all sounds a little bit like science fiction, you might be onto something. "I named him after the great science fiction creator, Isaac Asimov," said Aaron, referring to the great prophet, whose prophecy rate was 25% and improving with every passing millennium. "But you must agree that my creation is nothing compared to that of God. Me, for example." I looked at him for a moment, and I was beginning to believe that man, in that case Aaron Brummit, was the greatest creation the universe has ever seen, and thus a proof of the greatest creator the universe has ever seen, namely God. But then Asimo pulled the plug on Aaron Brummit's central processing unit. I was about to ask the robot why he murdered one of God's best creations, but he just shrugged his hips and said, "I'm only fighting for free speech."